Hey guys, in today's video I'm gonna analyze my perfect anti-chess win against the Serbian Grandmaster Miroslav Milkovic. If you want more of this content, please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon. Let's get started. Okay, so in this game I had the white pieces and I opened with e3, the best move in anti-chess. My dear opponent responded with e6, and we have the so-called open defense on the board. Here I went for the main line, which is b4, bishop takes, queen g4, bishop takes, queen takes g7, and now here a very critical moment comes. The only way for black to continue the game properly is bishop takes the pawn, and after bishop takes bishop, c5, black is decently fine. Of course, the other two options for black are either to take the king or take the bishop. However, both of them are losing. Let's see what happens in both. So, let's say that black decides to take the bishop. So we have queen takes pawn on h7, bishop takes pawn, pawn takes bishop, rook takes queen, h4, rook takes pawn, rook takes rook, queen takes rook. Now g3, queen takes pawn on g3, king d1, and in a couple of moves, white can win comfortably. The other option is actually, very unfortunately for my opponent, he took my king, which also loses as I mentioned. After queen takes pawn on f7, bishop takes pawn, queen h7. Here black has three options: bishop takes pawn, bishop takes knight, or rook takes queen. In the game, my opponent took the pawn, but all of these three moves lose for black. However, before we continue with the game, let's see what happens in the other two sequences. Let's say that my opponent decides to take the queen first. Then we have e4, rook takes pawn, rook takes rook, bishop takes knight, and here the dark squared bishop will just take all of the white's pieces. Of course, instead of rook takes pawn, there is also bishop takes knight, rook takes bishop follows, rook takes pawn, g4, rook takes pawn on c2, bishop h6. And here after knight takes h6 or rook a2, white is still winning. Okay, so let's see if, for example, instead of black taking the queen, black decides to take the knight first. We have rook takes bishop, rook takes queen, a3, rook takes h2, g4, rook takes pawn on c2, bishop b2, rook takes bishop, and after knight d2, white still wins the game. So guys, as you can see, after black takes the king here, black loses on the spot. As I explained to you, my opponent took the pawn on e3, so we have bishop takes bishop, rook takes queen, bishop takes pawn on a7, and now black has two options, either to take the bishop on a7 or take the pawn on h2. In the game, my dear opponent took my pawn, but let's see what happens if he decided to first take my bishop. So we have rook takes bishop, knight comes out on a3, rook takes knight, rook c1, rook a2, rook a1, rook takes c2, and now after g3, both of black's rooks hit the pawn on h2. So in a couple of moves, white wins the game. But as I said, My dear opponent decided to take my pawn on h2 first, which still unfortunately doesn't help him. So we have rook takes pawn, rook takes rook takes the bishop, knight comes out on a3 again, rook takes knight, rook c1, rook takes the pawn, rook a1, and here my dear opponent decided to take my rook. Of course, if he decided to take my pawn on c2, this would still lose the game for him. After g3, we have rook takes rook, bishop g2, rook takes bishop, rook a4, rook g3, rook a5, rook takes knight, rook a1, rook takes rook, and white wins the game. However, here after rook a1, my opponent took my rook, which kinda leads to the same outcome. So I played rook h3, rook takes bishop, rook a3, shuffling the rook over the other side of the board, rook takes knight, rook a4, rook g2, rook a1, rook takes pawn, and after rook a2 and rook takes rook, I won the game. And if we look at the computer analysis, we can see that I had only one inaccuracy and one mistake with 90% accuracy in this game. And unfortunately for my opponent, he only had one blunder, which turned out to be a fatal one with 64% accuracy. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching. Take care and I'm gonna see you very soon. Bye bye.